Okay students, so a quick run through of a few elasticities questions for the micro paper. First one is from a multiple choice section. The data is given for the A industry, so the A market in the UK, price elasticity of demand minus 0.6, income elasticity of demand of plus 1.3. Multiple choice says it might be deduced from the data that air travel is a normal good and demand is price inelastic. So if we have a look up here, you've got minus 0.6, so it's greater than minus 1, so that is inelastic. And also just the fact that it's 0 point something also should tell you it's always inelastic. PED is always negative. In terms of income elasticity of demand, well, it's got a positive relationship, so if incomes are increasing then demand would be increasing, so we do know that this is a normal good as well. So straight away we know that A is the correct answer. We'll just go through and double check. The decrease in the price of air travel will increase the total revenue. Well, it needs to be elastic demand for that to happen, so that's incorrect. Air travel is an inferior good. Well, there's a positive sign there, so we know that's incorrect. An increase in income will cause the price of air travel to fall. Well, we don't know any information from that because income elasticity of demand is just about income and demand. So we know that one's incorrect as well. So A is definitely the right answer. The question itself, if it was on the ES paper, it would be worth 3 marks. If it's on the A level paper, it'll be worth 4 marks. So if it's the ES paper, think KA and A marks. And if it's the A level paper, there's an extra A mark. Explain how the estimates might be used by an airline in the UK. You've got 2 ways to do this. Your K mark, you could either define PED or YED to get that mark. So the formula is the quickest way to do it. Percentage change in quantity demanded over percentage change in price, or percentage change in quantity demanded over percentage change in income. The application here in terms of why it's inelastic is because it is between 0 and minus 1, and the reason why it's a normal good is that it has a positive YED. If you wanted to, you could also add some figures, so a 10% rise in price would equal a 6% fall in quantity demanded, or a 10% rise in income would equal a 13% rise in quantity demanded. In terms of your analysis marks, we need to answer the specific question, so explain how the estimates might be used by an airline. If it is price elasticity of demand and you know it's inelastic, then you've just said the price would go up, the quantity demanded would only go down 6%, so there would be an overall increase in revenue and potentially then profit for that business as long as the costs remain the same. If it's income elasticity of demand, you would say that if incomes are rising, then demand will rise, so the business would increase the supply to meet that of aircraft or of seats on a plane. Okay. The next question is again multiple choice. You've got a graph in this one. It's got on one axis the price of Apple iPhones, on the other axis demand for BlackBerry phones. So it's not a supply and demand graph as such. What it is showing you is using XED. So you've got the price on this axis and you've got the demand on this axis. It says the diagram shows a relationship between the price of Apple iPhones and the demand for BlackBerry phone. It can be deduced from the diagram that these two goods are, well, if the price is going up and the demand is going up, you know you've got a positive relationship because they're both positive. If you remember the little mnemonic party season, nearly Christmas, positive substitute, negative complement, straight away you should be able to see that D is the correct answer. If you've got time, you could just cancel out the other ones. Are price elastic? Well, we don't have price information for price and demand for iPhones or price and demand for Blackberries, so it can't be a price elasticity of demand one. It can't have zero cross elasticity because there's an angle here which implies a relationship, so it can't be that one. They have negative cross elasticity. Well, one of these would have to be negative. You'd have to have a negative correlation or a downward slope, and a bit like the demand line itself, so it can't be that one. Then you've got the question, explain the effect of a price rise of Apple iPhones on the demand for BlackBerry phones. So again, we need to be thinking KAA, and another A if you're an A-level student. Easiest way, formula for cross elasticity of demand, percentage change in quantity demanded of good A over percentage change in price of good B. In terms of application, so a rise in the price of Apple would equal a rise in the demand of BlackBerry phones. In terms of the analysis, we could talk about consumers being less willing and able to buy iPhones. We could also talk about the reduced utility or consumer surplus of iPhones. We could also mention that the angle on this implies that it's a weak substitute, or that there is an inelastic cross elasticity of demand. Okay. Another multiple choice question, this one with reference to the reason provided, which of the following is most likely to have a high price elasticity of supply? By saying the word high, this is going to mean that the number will be large. If we know that price elasticity of supply is always positive, it's going to be a figure 2 or 3 or 4.5 or something like that, not a small figure, which would imply that this is going to be referring to elastic supply. So now when we look at the questions, we're looking for reasons why it would be elastic supply. IT technicians, because there is high demand. Well, as soon as it starts talking about demand, it's not really talking about price elasticity of supply. New houses, because they take a long time to build. If it's a long time to build, it's going to be unresponsive, so that would be an inelastic supply. Wheat, because large stockpiles are available. Having spare capacity or stocks is one way to have elastic supply. Organic vegetables, because they have close substitutes. Well, this is referencing XED, so we know that the answer would be C. The question then, explain why a business might face inelastic supply. Let's think along our K, A, A, and if you're A level, an additional A. So price elasticity of supply, most straightforward way is the formula, percentage change in quantity supplied over percentage change in price. So same as the definition for price elasticity of demand, we're just changing supply for demand. In terms of the application, the last question was talking about elastic supply, but this is talking about inelastic, and we have one example here of the inelastic supply. So if we use this one, then we can say that wheat is inelastic. So we've got our application, sorry, not wheat, houses are inelastic. And then to explain that, we want to say that the supply of houses, or the quantity supply, is unresponsive to a change in price. Just to apply the other definition, then the reason that they are unresponsive is over the long term, or it takes a long time, means that if the price rises now, the quantity supplied of houses might be next year. And the reason for that is that you need specialist builders, you need planning permission, you need factors of production such as land, which take time as well. Okay. The last question from this exam paper was within the case study, and it said, what does the evidence in the second paragraph of extract 1 suggest about the price elasticity of demand for Australian coal? Explain your answer. So it's a 4-marker. Again, KAA. Again, quick definition, percentage change in quantity demanded over percentage change in price. It says, despite the higher price of coal and reduced output, the revenues of big Australian producers have remained the same. Now, what we know is that if there's inelastic demand and you put prices up, then the quantity demanded falls a little bit and you increase your revenue. And if we have elastic demand and the price goes up, the quantity demanded falls a lot and your revenue goes down. But what this is saying is that the higher price, it's still a reduced output, but the revenues are the same. What would happen, that example would be, is that if the demand, or if the price rose by 10% and the demand fell by 10%, what you end up with is no change in the revenue. So the percentage changes are the same. So that is a PED of 1. And what that PED is unitary elasticity. You could draw the graph to show that. If you remember the unitary graph, it's a demand curve that's curved. And you have, if you can draw it accurately, and I haven't quite drawn accurately there, the gain there is exactly the same extent as the loss down here. So the price rises, the quantity demand falls, but that size of revenue lost there, so the revenue gain is the same as the revenue fall.